Hi everyone, it's Signe Whitson. I am a school counselor and author of the 8 Keys to End Bullying activity program. I wanted to share a brief video with you today about the key differences between rude, mean, and bullying behavior. This concept is something that originally came to me through a very run-of-the-mill routine interaction with someone, which I'll tell you about in just a minute, but it has really become the foundation of my work in understanding and bringing an end to bullying. It is how I begin my 8 Keys to End Bullying book, as well as the activity book for kids. And I usually start every presentation that I do for professionals, for parents, and even for kids on this key concept of how to distinguish between different types of unwanted behavior and why it's so important to do so. So let me tell you how this first sort of came on my radar. It was a fall day. I was at the grocery store. Like I said, it couldn't be more routine. I was picking some apples, and a woman that I sort of knew, I recognized, but I didn't know well. I think our daughters were in the same elementary school class. So she came up to me at the grocery store and she said, Signe, I just, found out that you do all of this work in the bullying prevention field. I never knew that. That's so wonderful. It has just gotten to be such a problem, and you'll never believe what happened to my daughter yesterday. So I take a deep breath because I am that person that is moved to tears each and every time I hear a heartbreaking story from a parent, from a teacher, from a child, from a caregiver. Even being in this field for several years and hearing about bullying often, my jaw routinely still drops, and I don't think I'll ever cease to be astounded by this pervasive cruelty among young people. So I'm sort of mentally preparing myself that I'm probably going to cry at the grocery store and in public, and that's okay. So I say, wow, what is it? What happened? She said, well, yesterday my daughter got off the bus, and by the time she was home, she had leaves and mulch, and they were stuck in her hair and her coat. And, she looked awful. And I said, oh gosh, that sounds bad. Was she really upset? And the mom said, no, she wasn't upset at all. She seemed to think it was funny that she had all these leaves, in her coat. And I said, oh, do you think it's possible that she was just sort of covering up for someone, or, she didn't want you to be upset? Because I know that is a really common thing among young people. Kids who are the target of bullies are often embarrassed, they're ashamed, and they also worry a lot about what their parents might do. Will the parents run into school and maybe make things worse for them? Will they call the other person's parents? And so kids often downplay reports of bullying. So I asked her if she thought that was the case. And she said, no, she actually thought it was funny. She told me that she threw leaves back at the boy that threw them at her. The nerve of kids these days. So I thought, oh, kids these days, maybe it wasn't just one person, maybe there's a whole group, maybe she feels very intimidated getting off the bus and walking home. So I asked that. I said, was it just this one person or was it a whole group of kids? And she said, no, just one boy, her and the boy throwing leaves back and forth at each other. And I thought to myself, oh, maybe it's the kind of situation where he teases her every day on the bus, and every day when she gets off, there's some sort of a problem, and this has become like, a pattern and something that she's, fears every day. So I asked that question, has this happened before? And she said, no. And as a matter of fact, we've been friends with this family for years. These kids have known each other since they were babies. They usually have a great interaction with each other. I don't know what got into him in this occasion, but I'm not going to have my daughter bullied. I am running into school tomorrow. I'm going to demand an appointment with the principal, and I'm going to make sure this bullying stops. And at that point, I didn't have any more questions to ask. I was trying to mentally figure out where exactly the bullying was, and I think I just went back to picking my apples and minding my own business again. And I do know, as a counselor, that I always try to start with people's emotion and go where they are. But I really just, even in racking my brain, couldn't quite figure out how this added up to a disturbing bullying situation. And that's when it first occurred to me that things happen with kids that don't always look great to adults, but it doesn't mean that they're horrible. It doesn't mean that they're bullying. And it's really important that we make some distinctions between behaviors that are rude, behaviors that are mean, and behaviors that are bullying. So I first heard children's author Trudy Ludwig talk about these specific terms, and I've sort of fleshed them out since then. Trudy Ludwig, by the way, is a fantastic award-winning children's author. She's the author of The Invisible Boy. She's the author of Confessions of a Former Bully. My favorite book that she's written is My Secret Bully. So please check her out, especially if you're working with young kids, because she has fantastic resources. Anyway, I now sort of try to base a lot of my work around these concepts, or at least the foundations of my work around distinguishing between rude, mean, and bullying. Rude behavior, let's start there. I talk about as inadvertently saying or doing something that hurts someone else. I give you the best example of rude behavior in my own life, and that is a certain relative whose name it would be rude for me to mention, so I won't. But I will tell you that every time we are together, she tells me that she's trying to help me by giving me some personal suggestions. And most recently, we were at a Thanksgiving table and there's 25, 30 people there. And she asks me if I've started to think about coloring my hair. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, is there like a lot of gray? What's going on? You know, what's she thinking? And I know that this relative has my best intentions in her mind, and she's not trying to embarrass me. She is trying to help in her own world. But to me, it comes across as quite rude and quite embarrassing at times, especially when there's a whole crowd around. For kids, usually rude behavior looks a lot more like a young kid who butts in line because he's 6, and it's so important to be first in line when you're 6. And in the process of doing so, he angers the people behind him, or he accidentally steps on someone's toe, or he elbows them just a little bit. And what I hear as a school counselor all the time is, he jumped in front of me, he's a bully. Or he stepped on my foot, he's bullying me. I'm going to tell my mom. And while no one likes to be butted in front of in line, and that is certainly a behavior in a school setting that can be redirected, or we can give kids skills to learn how to assertively address the person who butted in front of them in line, or who elbowed them or stepped on their toe. It is qualitatively different than bullying behavior. Usually rudeness among kids is impulsive, it's spontaneous, it's based on their own narcissism. It's a lot of things, and it's even undesirable, but it is qualitatively different than bullying, which we will soon get to. So that's rude behavior. The next thing I talk about is meanness. And meanness does turn a corner, where I think rude behavior is inadvertent, unintentional. Mean behavior I do define as intentionally hurtful behavior. Something that usually happens once or twice, and what I often see with rudeness is that it happens between people that have some sort of pre-existing either friendship or they're teammates, they're acquainted with each other, and it's usually a pretty nice relationship, but then something happens. And someone is angry, someone is hurt, someone is frustrated, so they do something to get back at that other person. So it may be someone saying, you can't sit here, or you suck at soccer, or I hate you. I mean, there's a lot of things that kids say and do to each other that are mean and they're cruel. But the hallmark of the mean behavior as opposed to bullying is that it happens once, twice, usually because there are these hurt feelings. When we're talking about bullying behavior, there are 3 elements that sort of by definition have to be present. And with young people, I talk about them as the 3 Ps because it makes them much easier to recall. The first we've talked about, that is purpose. As opposed to rude behavior, which is usually unintentional, bullying behavior always is intentional and purposeful. The person who bullies is trying to hurt or embarrass or harm somebody else. The second has to do with pattern. this is something that is not just happening once or twice because people are angry at each other. It is happening again and again and again and again. And the person who is bullied knows that they have hurt the other person. The target has asked them to stop or has clearly somehow showed that they are uncomfortable with what is going on. And yet, in that situation, there's a clear lack of empathy, and the child who bullies does it again and again as a pattern. The third P that we talk about is power. And bullying, by definition, involves an imbalance of power. When I was a young kid, I had a vision in my head of what a bully was. First of all, his name was Spike. And in my own kid language, he was a big boy, meaning he was physically bigger, stronger than me. I thought he was going to hide behind a bush, and I thought he was going to try to steal the milk money that my mom would give me in the 1980s when we still brought milk money to school. And thankfully, Spike never materialized in my life, though I spent goodness knows how many years worrying about him. And what I've learned since then is that the imbalance of power could be in size, it could be in strength, it could be in age, it could be in athletic ability, or even academics. But what we're seeing in the 21st century kids who bully is that the power usually has to do with social power. And no longer do we see bullying dynamics typically one person against another. What we see is that one person chooses to bully, one target, but it's not enough to sort of have this even fight. They get all of their friends to also socially ostracize, humiliate, gang up on, or they use social media and they publicly humiliate someone that way. So that's the imbalance of power can be sort of these physical characteristics, but very often what we're seeing is that bullies use their social power to exclude and ostracize someone else. So purpose, pattern, and power are the three things that by definition distinguish and define bullying from other types of behavior. So why is this so important? Here's the thing. We are living in a world of 24/7 news media coverage and sound bites. And because of that, we have a better opportunity than ever before to bring attention to important issues. When I was growing up in the first part of my career, no one was talking about bullying. It was just sort of a rite of passage, or people said kids will be kids, and they dismissed some really horrifying things that were happening among young people. But now we are talking about bullying, and I think that is a great thing. It offers tons of protection to kids who before were sort of left on their own. Now all 50 states in the United States have anti-bullying laws on the books, and many, many, many more states are adding anti-cyberbullying laws. So we've made a lot of progress as a nation in paying attention to bullying, and that I couldn't be happier about things like that. What I'm worried about is that I've already seen gratuitous references to bullying, that is overgeneralizing, calling even rudeness and mean behavior bullying. What I've seen is that has started to create a bit of a little boy who cried wolf phenomena. And parents and educators and administrators and even kids who would have actually really paid attention to the term before and done something about it or changed their behavior are now starting to ignore it. And this issue, in my concern is that this issue is going to lose its urgency just as quickly as it came to prominence. And so I write, I present, I start off all my presentations and articles with making sure that we, adults and kids alike, know how to distinguish between rude, mean, and bullying behavior. We know how to call it what it is, because when we do that, we know how to properly intervene, and we know exactly what to pay attention to. So before I go, I want to just give you two resources that I've developed over the years in support of this idea of carefully defining our terms and recognizing that words really do matter. They are both available on my website, and I will put the specific links down below. The first is a screening tool. So if you are a parent, or if you are a teacher, if you are a counselor, any type of professional, and a young person comes to you or a parent comes to you and reports bullying, this quick 4-question screening tool will help you zero in on these ideas of purpose, pattern, and power and figure out if this is sort of a run-of-the-mill, everyday rudeness or mean situation among young people, which should be handled through redirection, through talking with kids, through some conflict resolution, mediation, problem solving, but should be treated substantively different than if you discover that there is purposeful behavior patterned over time with an imbalance of power. Now we've got a bullying situation on our hands. Now we need a whole different type of intervention. So the screening tool is available for you to use. And the second thing that's on my website is a fun activity that I've developed for kids. It gives groups of kids, or this can also be used one-on-one, very realistic, real-life scenarios, common things that happen among kids. And I actually developed this activity with kids. They're all based on real-life situations that kids have been in. So what I do with kids is I read the scenario and I say, if you think this is an example of rude behavior, I want you to stand here. If you think this is an example of mean behavior, I want you to stand here. And if you think this is an example of bullying behavior, you stand over in this part of the room. I read the scenario, the kids all go to their places. We look around and see who's standing where, and then we discuss it a little bit. And we tease it out and we talk about the different aspects. And then I give them the answer. Was it rude? Was it mean? Was it bullying? In the meantime, I let sort of the kids convince each other. And if they want to switch places because someone made a really compelling argument, they can do that too. And that movement, as we all know, sort of that right-brained experience helps kids in their learning. Plus, it's just fun to hear these different scenarios that kids can often relate to. So that activity, along with directions on how to use that with kids, how to debrief some of the scenarios, is also available on my website. So thank you so much for listening. I hope this has been helpful to you. And please remember that words matter, and understanding the differences between rude, mean, and bullying behavior really does help us intervene effectively with our young people. Thanks.